get started with today's episode, I would like to quickly read you our podcast disclaimer. This podcast is for educational purposes only, and it is not to substitute for professional care by a doctor or other qualified medical professional. You should always speak with your physician or other healthcare professionals before doing any fasting, changing your diet in any way, taking or adjusting any medications or supplements, or adopting any treatment plan for a health problem. The use of any other products or services purchased by you as a result of this podcast does not create a healthcare provider-patient relationship between you and any of the experts affiliated with this podcast. Any information and statements regarding dietary supplements have not been evaluated by the Food and Drug Administration and are not intended to diagnose, treat, cure, or prevent any disease. All right, and now we'll get started with today's episode.
Hi everyone, I'm Dr. Nadia Pataguana, and welcome to another episode of the Fasting Method podcast. I am here today to answer a few more of your questions. You guys send in lots of questions. They're really great. And you'll see today's questions that have been selected. They're all somehow, or a few of them are connected. And so I think it's really good to have an opportunity to hear the same thing said by a different person. So maybe you've heard one of us talk about this before, or maybe just asked in a slightly different way. And as you probably have heard me say many, many times, I'm a big fan of repetition. So I really think that sometimes just hearing it said slightly different may be that ha-ha moment for you. So hopefully there's some good info here for you guys. Your questions today aren't as much about fasting, it seems, as they are about food. So anyway, I've taken on this challenge to talk to you a little bit about food quality, plant-based diets, and also fiber. Okay, so let me get to some of these questions. So the first question says, what are your thoughts on food quality? Should I try and eat grass-fed meats and organic vegetables? And how important is it to switch to this top quality food alongside fasting? Okay, this is a great question. Of course, I'm going to start these next 5 or 6 questions by saying that we are a fasting program, okay? And the majority of my career has been spent teaching people how to fast and learning about fasting alongside my patients and my clients. But in the beginning of my professional journey, I was a lot more focused on food. So of course, I've got a lot of personal and professional sort of dietary information I'd be very happy to share with you guys. But also, I understand that you need to find that, I'm always saying this, I've written a blog post about this, you need to find the right balance between, of course, eating and fasting. And so these are really good questions that you guys are sending us. And I fully understand why you're asking these questions. But I want to, of course, repeat that no, none of us have forgotten that this is a fasting program. And if you're listening and, you weren't the one that sent in these questions, maybe you're thinking, why are people asking so much about food? But of course it makes sense, right? Because we're looking for that right balance between eating and fasting. And we're also trying to find what is the best therapeutic eating approach to combine with my therapeutic fasting approach. So these are really great questions. And really to answer your question about food quality, I think it's a really great question. And so I'd be a fool to say that better quality foods wouldn't be better for your therapeutic eating journey and for your healing journey in general. Of course, I think that there's some value in this. I think the problem for many people becomes financially. They start to worry about the expense of searching for food quality. And also it can be just sourcing the best quality foods. And it could be this never ending sort of search. You might be somebody who's, not really satisfied with the food quality around you. And so you're endlessly trying to find it either online or stores near you. And you just might live somewhere where it's just really not available. I think one of the next questions says this. So it's about, I think, sourcing the best quality food that is available to you, whether it's financially or locally. I hope that this makes a lot of sense because, of course, I think that food quality is important. And so if you're somebody who financially can afford the very best, I think that's what you should go for. But I still think that all of us should stay within what is available to us. I say this a lot when it comes to fasting. People ask about extended fasting and the benefits of extended fasting. And I say, the reason why I call the 66-hour fast the Formula One fast is because I don't think everyone's a Formula One driver. I don't think that long fast is available to everyone, meaning you may not have yet the ability to fast for longer than 24 hours. And so that's what you should do right now is fast for 24 hours if that's what you're able to do. And the same, I think, goes for food quality. I think that you need to do what's available to you. Okay? So I hope that makes sense. And so you do the very best that you can with what you got. I think that goes for a lot of things in life. All right. So question number 2 says, is bacon a processed meat? Is having non-grass-fed bacon okay? Because here in India, we don't get grass-fed bacon. So this is a great question, a great follow-up to the first question, right? So you go for what is available to you locally and what is available to you financially and otherwise. Now, having said that, I do have a suggestion for you when it comes to this particular food because you asked, is it processed? It is processed. And some bacon is more processed than others. Even within Costco in North America, which is very familiar to a lot of people, there are tons of different bacons. And so within all those different choices, you want to choose the one that's least processed. Now, best case scenario, in my opinion, 2 things here. You asked about processed and grass-fed. I already talked about the grass-fed option a little bit when I talked about food quality in the first option. If it's just not available, it's not available. You're going to go for best available. But the other thing is that bacon, what we call bacon, is actually pork belly. And pork belly, if you go to your butcher, you can actually get just the pork belly thinly sliced from your butcher, and you can fry this up or grill this up at home. So you actually don't have to have the meat processed. You can actually have it. And it's very, very common in Portugal, in Spain, maybe in some Latin countries as well, to have pork belly. And I know for sure in Asian countries, some Asian countries like Korea, I believe, and China, they have a lot of pork belly that is not processed, so not turned into what we call bacon. Okay, so that's another really good option for you. Okay. Question number 3. Do you have any tips for fasting on a vegetarian diet? My partner's a vegetarian and I am interested in cutting out meat also, but I am not sure about the nutritional value of meat substitutes like tofu and other plant-based proteins. Okay, great question. There's another question about this as well today, and I'm going to tackle that in just a little bit. But I really liked your question because, like you, I'm also not quite sure about any of these substitutes. Okay, so the same thing goes for generally. So we're a fasting program. We're a very inclusive food program. We have worked with people that were carnivore, omnivore, plant-based, vegan, vegetarian. I think all of these are options for people. However, I think that the best dietary choice is going to be when you've chosen to eat whole food, real food, regardless of whether you're carnivore, omnivore, or plant-based vegan. So I think that the important thing here is your question was, how do I feel about meat substitutes? I'm not sure about them. I actually not quite sure about these processed packaged, meat substitutes like the vegan hamburgers and the vegan meat-like products, okay? Not necessarily because of just the fact that they're using tofu and you might be concerned about tofu, maybe not, but also because a lot of these foods are highly processed and they have 1,000,001 different ingredients and many of them we don't even recognize. So best case scenario when it comes to food is whole food, real food, 1 ingredient foods, okay? So if it's meat, it's meat. If it's some type of plant-based food, like a vegetable or a legume, if you're into that, whatever it is, I think that that's the way that we should go. The difficult thing, I think, is learning how to combine foods when you're plant-based so that you get a complete diet. And that takes a little bit of work. That takes a little bit of learning, okay? If you don't come from a plant-based vegetarian culture background, you may not be quite aware of how to combine foods so that you can get your complete meals, complete proteins, okay? So that, I think that's what you need to look into. I, like you, am very weary about these processed meat substitute things. So I would stay away from these personally, okay? So next question says, I would love to hear more about fasting in a plant-based diet. I don't avoid fruit or below the ground veggies. I eat nuts and seeds, but no dairy. It seems like you both speak more about paleo low carb. I have cut out most highly processed foods and I am doing TRE, time restricted eating, usually a 16 to 18 hour fast. There is so much conflicting information regarding diet. I totally agree with you. That's why we're trying the best that we can to be very consistent with our answers, and to keep it as simple as possible, although I don't think that this is often simple at all. So good news, as I said a little earlier today, I think it does require a little bit of education when it comes to switching to a type of diet that you didn't culturally grow up with. So if you weren't plant-based vegetarian culturally growing up, then I think that it is important to get a little bit of coaching with that. We do have an amazing coach on our team that is plant-based, and I believe her to be an expert on plant-based diets and fasting, and that's Coach Lisa. I always like to give you guys good resources and references, so I think Coach Lisa is a great resource and reference for this. I think that you're right that we talk a lot about paleo and low-carb and ketogenic diets, and the reason for that is simply because we're trying to, again, going back to the first question when I said we're trying to combine the right balance between a therapeutic diet and therapeutic fasting for your healing journey. And so when we talk about diet, we always remind people that our main objective here, when I say to you guys as your coach that I want you to keep your eye on the ball, our main objective here is to lower insulin, the hormone insulin, in order to reverse these insulin resistant expressions such as diabetes and PCOS and obesity and fatty liver. And so the reason why we talk about low carb diets is because low carb diets tend to be low insulin diets, but not always, because if they're highly processed, and there are a lot of low carb ketogenic diets today that are highly processed. So if they're highly processed, they're not low in insulin, right? As you know, probably there's a lot of processed diet foods out there, including processed ketogenic foods. So I would definitely continue to stay away from those like you have. Otherwise, I think, again, you can fast with any diet, but the best diet to combine with your fasting is always going to be a whole food type diet, okay? One ingredient food whenever possible type diet, non-processed and as low in insulin as possible. So in our resources, in our TFM community quick guides, I have shared with you guys there my food pyramid. And in my food pyramid, I've basically placed foods according to their likely insulin response. And so you'll find that both plant-based and not plant-based foods at the base of the food pyramid are very low in insulin production. So I do believe that you can do, and of course, Coach Lisa would agree with this, that you can follow a low insulin plant-based type diet. Okay, might require a little bit of coaching with somebody or just your own research. Maybe looking at that food pyramid might be helpful, okay, for you to have a look at what is most likely lower in insulin production in order to combine with your fasting. There's, of course, two reasons why this is important. One, because it's going to make your fasting easier. If you have a higher insulin diet the day before you fast, then the day that you fast, you're going from a high insulin state to sort of a drop in insulin, and that drop doesn't feel very good, right? You're going to go through that keto flu over and over and over again, and it just feels really, really hard. You have more cravings, more dehydration. You just don't feel well. So in order to avoid that, you sort of stay in this low insulin state on your eating days as well, and that makes it a lot easier. And just over time, you're going to see a lot more results quicker, right? You're going to have a swifter healing journey. All right, so I hope that makes sense. Let me get to the next question. So question number 5 says, I follow a high-fat, low-carb diet on my eating days. I seem to struggle to keep my carbs low while trying to get in my daily fiber. I try to eat as much high-fiber food as possible, like avocados, chia seeds, and vegetables at each meal. How do you add fiber to your diet while staying low-carb? Should I consider fiber supplements? Okay, so we're going to have 2 fiber questions here. They're very similar, I think, and I want to address this. again, resources for you guys. Really, really great resource. There's many out there, but one that I remember very fondly, going to a conference and listening to Dr. Zoe Hardcomb, who I'm a big fan of, and she talked about what the fiber. Okay, that was the name of her presentation. You can probably find a YouTube video of this online. She's got great information. She actually gave some graphs and information for our book. She was one of our references for our book, The PCOS Plan. And she talks quite a bit about fiber. And I truly believe that this is a great resource for you if you're wondering about fiber. So for both of these questions, question number 5 and question number 6 about fiber, I think Dr. Zoe Hardcomb, and I'll spell it out for you, Harcombe, first name Zoe. She's in the UK and she's got a PhD in this stuff. She is really, really good with this type of information. Just to narrow it down, you do need fiber. I think that that's what people ask. Do we need fiber? You need fiber so long as you're eating and you're eating higher carb. That's what fiber is for. Fiber is nature's way to protect us, to mitigate that insulin response, and to have all the physiological duties that it has in order to help us to deal with carbohydrates, from a blood sugar standpoint to digestion to bowel movements to all kinds of stuff. Now, fiber also, of course, bulks up your stools, which is something that people often feel that they need because mostly, and this might be shocking to you because you probably think of fiber for constipation, but really you need fiber if you have very loose stools, which is something that happens quite a bit when you switch to a lower carb diet, a higher fat diet, and when you're fasting. So about half of you guys will find that you have very, very loose stools when you switch over because of that release of insulin. There's a million reasons, because of the extra fat going through you and possibly adding magnesium. The wrong type of magnesium may cause really loose stools as well. So anyway, fiber, like chia seeds you mentioned, will help bulk up your stools. So it's a great way to help deal with that concern. However, your question is a good one, but my answer is yes, you're right that you get high fiber, lots of fiber from certain things like avocados, chia seeds, and some vegetables. Okay. But the answer, I think, is, should I consider fiber supplements? I personally don't. I don't see the need. I think that when you consume carbs, your carbs should be accompanied by fiber. Hopefully the fiber that comes with that carb. We know that a lot of high carb foods are very, very low in fiber. So that is the problem right there. I think it's the high carb food that's the problem. So if you're consuming these other low carb foods that have a ton of fiber, I think that you're good. So your question probably is, and I'm probably not answering it the way that you'd like, your question probably is, how much fiber do I need a day? And the answer is, it depends. If you're having a very high carb diet, then you do need a lot of fiber. If you're having a very low carb diet, then you need the adequate amount of fiber to go with that. And usually it comes with those, avocados, chia seeds, and vegetables. And if you listen or watch the Dr. Zoe Hardcomb's lecture, which is super funny, by the way, she talks about poop quite a bit, you will understand this a little bit better, I hope. Okay. Next question, hopefully will answer anything that I may have left out there or a little bit more. Being that fiber helps to slow the digestion of sugars and fats, therefore decreasing blood glucose spikes, would you recommend taking a daily fiber supplement? What about when fasting? Does it technically break a fast even though the body is not digesting it? Okay, great follow-up question. So you're right that it mitigates that insulin response, and so it mitigates that sugar spike. And as I said, fiber also bulks up your stools when you're having a lot of fat so that you're not having, hopefully, loose stools. Okay, so it is helpful, not necessarily in the digestion of sugars. It doesn't help to digest the sugars, but it does help to mitigate, to slow down that insulin response. Would I recommend taking a daily fiber supplement like in the last question? No, not necessarily. I would recommend you increasing maybe your chia seeds or some of the other fibers if you need help bulking up your stools, if you've got loose stools. Although if you have loose stools, you really want to make sure that you look at the root cause of that. For example, if you're taking the wrong magnesium supplement, you should switch, or if there's any other reason for the loose stools. If your loose stools are simply because you've increased your fat and you're fasting a little bit more, and so you've got more of that release, then yes, I do think that you should look at some, I call these fasting aids, chia seeds in water, to bulk up your stools if you need, because of loose stools specifically caused by a high fat diet or from extended fasting, okay? Otherwise, I do not recommend a fiber supplement. Personally, I don't. And if you're dealing with constipation, that's a whole other question, okay? Then I actually have a whole other recommendation for people that are dealing with constipation, either because they've changed their diet, or because they're fasting, okay? So if you do want to know more about what I recommend for constipation, then maybe ask me in another podcast and I'd be happy to answer that. So how about when fasting? No, I don't recommend a fiber supplement unless if you have loose stools from fasting, which I used to get, then I did a chia seed pudding with water. And does it technically break a fast even though the body is not digesting it? So this is another great question. So if you're using a fiber food or a fast food like avocados for your fast, does it technically break a fast? Well, that will depend on how much of an insulin response I think that particular food has. So the reason why I think that fast foods like avocado and chia seeds are great fasting aids if needed is because they have a very, very little to insignificant insulin response. So I think that if you need it, yes, definitely have one of these lower insulin foods as your fasting aid. Okay, I hope that was clear, and I am done answering your 6 questions. This was really great. I feel like it went by really fast, shorter than I think usual for so many questions, but I hope that it was useful nonetheless, and I look forward to answering more of your questions next time. Have a great week and happy fasting, everyone. Take care.